mine, Nez. Welcome to CVTV, bro.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man. I'm excited, dude. How long have you been tattooing for?
To be honest, I don't have like a clear memory of how long I've been tattooing, but I would have to say anywhere from 12 to 10 years. It's a very blurry time in my life, specifically when I started tattooing.
Right.
My introduction to tattooing was when I came home. Actually, I didn't come home. I went to my grandparents' house and I ran into my uncle getting tattooed by my other uncle. Was getting like his nickname tattooed on his neck, and that was my first time seeing tattooing, and it was like big blocky lettering. And I was already getting introduced into, I was already into graffiti, and I was pretty much into lettering, so it was like a crazy introduction from transferring letter to skin from the walls, pretty much.
And right there, how old were you?
I have to say like 13 years old. Tattoo name comes from my last name being Martinez, and then just wanted to shorten it up and just be like Nez. I don't know if it's like always spending time trying to come up with a graffiti name. I didn't think of it sooner, but if I would have, I probably would have wrote that. If it was a thing, Yeah.
How long have you been running Nez for now?
Nez has been a thing possibly since like 2014.
Yeah, right.
About.
Yeah. As long as I can remember. Yeah. I don't know if you remember, but when I first met
Tattoos Earth or some shit like that.
Eric Tattoos Earth.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, but I think that was Facebook, bro. It wasn't even Instagram.
Yeah, it was MySpace and Facebook.
Yeah. No, it was a long time, and I think I came across your work because you were tattooing. We grew up in the same area. Yeah. And a lot of dudes have tattoos from you, and I was always like, "Who's doing your guys' tattoos?" And then they were like, "Oh, some guy, Eric," and I was like, "Eric," and then I found your Facebook and I hit you up, and then that was years ago, man.
You came to my house.
Yeah.
Remember that? It's crazy. That was like in 2010, 2011.
Yeah, roughly. You were doing at that time. I think you were doing a lot more bolder work.
Like traditional, new school.
Yeah.
Like borderline traditional with like realistic.
Yeah. And I remember seeing the transition from when you went to that to like the getting into the realism. You would text me pictures and send me stuff like, oh, like check out what I did today, and I was like, oh, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where did you grow up?
Grew up in Cudahy, which is pretty much located between Southgate and Maywood. Probably the best way to explain it.
Yeah. You always have an artistic background?
Artistic background. Honestly, I think it started with coloring books. Like growing up as a kid, I had this little like book holder that had almost every book that was in the Disney series of like books and movies, and being able to go through those as a kid, like the choice of like color choices and seeing what pops, and then going into getting coloring books as a kid and trying to mimic them exactly. Yeah, that's kind of what started the fascination of like being able to translate what you see to what you can put on paper. Whenever I'll be in class or like 5th grade or whatever, and being able to remember something I just colored it and draw it on paper, from coloring it into becoming a memory. Almost like when you draw roses for a long time, they just become a memory. You can just draw them anywhere, anyhow. Right. Just copying and like literally just copy and paste, I guess you would say, becoming like a little copy machine. At a young age.
And you were into like, it was always like coloring when you were little, or?
Coloring, my parents had me doing a lot of crossword puzzles, a lot of like Legos, stuff like that, stuff that have made you like use your brain, I guess, to create stuff,
Right.
I think my parents didn't really push too much art. They kind of let me do what I wanted to do, in a sense of like, if I wanted to play with like Hot Wheels, or if I wanted to be like, doing coloring books or crossword puzzles. But I think they were more disciplined in the fact that like if I like something, to keep doing it. My parents, they can seem traditional, but they're not. For sure not. Like when I even brought up the fact of tattooing to my dad, that same moment he was like, all right, cool, let's go buy this stuff.
Right.
And that's how it all started.
They were very supportive of it?
Yeah, like off the bat.
Man, that's crazy because you hear a lot of, when I've talked to other people about it, it's like shut down. Like they're like, no, like that's not an option. Like, you know what I mean? Like, were they born here, or were they born in?
They were born in Mexico. and they pretty much came over here. I think my mom was like 2 when she came over here, and my dad was like 17.
You know, it's like when you're at that age, you're like you want to mention that, you know, they have always thought like, oh, you have to get an education. The only way to make a living around here is to make go to school, get a good job, and you know what I mean, like. And when you mention something like that, as far as like tattooing, a lot of them you hear like, oh, like, you know, you can't make a living like that. Like, obviously it had a bad reputation for itself years ago, you know.
Yeah, but I guess when I started tattooing, it was already the 2000s, you know, 2009s, and
yeah,
those times I feel like a lot of stuff was changing, and
right.
There was all of a sudden like even people who did graffiti were making money, because before I started tattooing, I used to paint murals for work, like, and at first they thought it was bad to do graffiti, like they were like, hell no. But then they seen that I was able to get like a school working permit through something called like Hub City, got a job, and then I'd work at the school, and at the same time they hired me to paint murals of their like team or whatever it was, you know. And being like 14 years old and doing that for a living, they were kind of like, okay, well, he's making money off of his artwork, so they started supporting it. So I guess when I transitioned to tattooing, it was easy for them to see like, okay, he did something out of graffiti, he's probably gonna do something out of tattooing.
Yeah, because you also painted the mural in, was it Elizabeth?
Yeah, I was the school I went to, that's where it all started.
Yeah.
It started with like getting a random search in class, you know, and they found my book, like graffiti book with drawings, and then I also had a graffiti magazine in it, and it happened to have like a picture of one of my pieces in it, you know, and that's when they were like, oh, like, why do you have this magazine? And I lied and I said, oh, it's because my uncle comes out in it, you know, and this is his book. I didn't want to say the truth, it was me. Eventually the dean was like, I know it's you, people told me it's you, and I would like for you to paint a mural at our school, you know, and that's kind of how it started. Actually, so here's the crazy part. So in the middle of that, they were already working on a program called Woodcraft Rangers, and they were already had some guy hired to do the murals for the school.
Oh, okay.
So this was like a guy who was already like a well-known graffiti writer. You know, his name is, everyone knows who it is. You know, he goes by Ryan. You know, he does a lot of he's more in the art scene now, fine arts, but still graffiti related. And they had already hired him, I guess, to do the murals, and they had him go on lunch. And when they went in lunchtime, when he went in lunchtime to paint, actually, he was painting like a little cabinet where they keep like the softball stuff and all these sports things, and he was painting, showing the kids that kind of gathered in, like, hey, come after class and have me paint this mural.
Right.
And that happened literally the day after they told me about the mural thing. And then they told me there's going to be a guy here who is above age that's going to be handling the program, but they want me to be part of the mural process, pretty much. And that's kind of how it happened, and a bunch of group of friends decided like, that we're doing graffiti too. We're like, oh, let's all do it together. But I obviously on my own, they had already spoken to me about it, so on my own I went out and started doing more schools with the same guy.
Yeah.
I was going to the school, I did the mural, and I also, I believe I ended up getting sent to Bell High School in the middle of that mural getting done. Or multiple murals at the school getting done.
Right.
And I used that as an excuse to get back into school. Because you had to get accepted like by like a certain grade that you would have to pass the test, you know, instead of getting transferred in. I remember telling a counselor that was really cool, like, hey, like I need to be here, like, to be able to work on it. Like, I can't go from Bell, walk all the way over here, and then work on it after school, like, whatever. And it worked out. The next day, they transferred me back.
How long were you in Bell for?
I was in Bell probably for about a month.
Okay.
Yeah, probably less than that.
When was the transition from the graffiti to and into the tattooing? Like when you were like, okay, you know what, I want to do tattooing now. Like talk a little bit of how that started, that transition.
So when I started doing graffiti, I think was 11 years old to like when I started doing it like on paper. 12, 13, I think I started doing it on the streets. 14, 15 was pretty well off in the streets with that stuff. I think 13, 14 was I got exposed to tattooing, and I started getting tattooed at the age of 13. And I'd go hang out with my uncle almost every time I had the chance to go watch him tattoo either family members, friends. They do like barbecue and tattoo, and either work on their lowriders, whatever it would be. But everything was kind of like creative wise, you know. But then, in that period of time, they kind of introduced me also into some bad stuff that would probably like switch my whole mindset. I would say as a young teen, you know, they got me involved into like specifically like drugs, and stuff like that, at a very young age. Like exposed me to it, and like almost made me feel like I had to do it, to even be a part of their group. And that's kind of how it all started. You know, my parents didn't even know. They just thought I was sleeping over at my grandma's house, hanging out with my cousins, playing Xbox. You know, but in reality, I'm over here with these guys, like getting tattooed and doing all this stuff. And, little by little, I stopped doing graffiti, and I started drawing more tattoo-related stuff. And I believe when I told my dad I wanted to start tattooing, it would be probably like 15, 16, maybe even 17. It's not no clear memory of that because of what I was going through. So in that transition, I believe I got into tattooing, and I asked my uncle if he can teach me, and he kind of gave me like a very shut out like answer, like kind of like not really yes or no, kind of didn't want to. So one time, like I went over and he wasn't there. It was just like my aunt. I think she was like cleaning outside, and I was inside. And I decided to like grab his machine and like look at it, like study it. I even like turned it on and like poked myself with it, not knowing you had to switch the needle, none of that stuff.
Oh shit.
Yeah, and I was just like, oh shit, let me figure it out. And then he came home that same day to his house, and I was still there with my other uncles, and I believe we were like cleaning their garage or something, like helping them organize something. And I had asked him like, hey, can I tattoo myself? And he's like, well, if you want to, but I'm not gonna help you. And I was like, what the fuck? Okay, doesn't want to teach me. He's like, well, stuff's right there, figure it out. And I started tattooing this like star, nautical star on my wrist. Literally, like I just drew it on there like all crookedly, not too bad, but drew it on there. And then he seen that I was like just chewing myself up, and he just like, give me that thing. He just took the machine and started fixing it up and doing it himself. And that's kind of how that started.
Yeah, I guess we could say that was your first tattoo then, right?
That wasn't my first tattoo. I had already gotten.
No, that you had done.
Technically, yes, that was my very first tattoo.
What was your first tattoo on someone?
On somebody was a Cowboys star. Everybody was surprised, and when that happened, to be honest, I hadn't had my equipment yet. I had met a guy in high school named Memo. And he had a friend named Jordan who I became really cool with as well, because he was like into rock music, and so was I, playing guitar and all that stuff. And I knew these guys were tattooing people because people in school were like, oh, I got this tattoo done by this guy. And I was like, in school? Like, what the fuck, getting away with tattooing people in school? Next thing you know, I'm trying to find out like exactly more about this guy. He's in the police academy, and he's over here tattooing people, And next thing you know, like I tell this guy like, oh, I know how to tattoo too. And he's like, oh, come over and hang out. And I ended up going to this guy Roger's house, and they're tattooing a bunch of like straight like gangsters from Florence, like crazy people. I'm like, oh shit, what the fuck? These people are like legit tattooing people. And this guy Memo's like, you can use my stuff. My homie Gabriel wants to get a tattoo, and I'm just like, oh, for sure. Like, what is he supposed to get? He wants to get a cowboy shirt. He's gonna pull up right now. He said he'll let you do it. And he pulls up, and I do the tattoo, not knowing how to do anything. I like just wing it, and I finished the tattoo. And this Memo started cracking up at the end. He's like, you didn't know what you were doing, huh? But you figured it out on the way. And I was like, yeah. And ever since then, that's actually a story that he has. And he's like, oh, he always tells me, like, when I do see him, like, I gave you that shot to figure it out with my stuff, you know? So he kind of like takes pride in being that person, you know?
At that time, how did the tattoo, I mean, for being, not knowing nothing, it came out pretty decent.
Yeah, I actually have the photo saved in one of my hard drives. I gotta go back and look at it, but it's obviously not a good tattoo, but it's not a bad tattoo. Like the lines were not crooked because I used the shader to clean up the edges before I did the hard lines, or I think I didn't even do hard lines. I think I did it all with the shader, to be honest. You know, or I believe I did like dot. I sketched it in dot by dot instead of doing a straight line. And then I just shaded in within the dots connecting them. So strategically, I think I came up with like a plan as I was going to try to make it seem like I did know how to tattoo. After that, I believe I tattooed somebody from high school as well. It was a girl. I did like a butterfly behind the ear. And I actually messed it up pretty bad because that was my first line work tattoo. And I remember even like helping her find the tattooer to fix it. And I even went with her to get it fixed. Like I went to the shop in Maywood, and she got it fixed and everything. And I was like, okay, cool, whatever. That was over. And then from there, I just kept finding people who were willing to let me, you know, tattoo them. Most of it was on myself, to be honest. Most of it was on myself. And at the time, I was still doing graffiti, so I was able to tattoo a lot of graffiti friends. And actually, in the middle of the transition of stopping the graffiti stuff and doing tattooing, I had got into like a few like groups of people, and one of them allowed me to tattoo the shit out of a lot of people. Like they just let me do anything, just draw it on them and tattoo, and that's kind of what got my flow going, I guess. Like I would probably do like 6 tattoos or more in one shot, you know.
Right.
And they'd be lettering of the crew or whatever they wanted, but graffiti related stuff.
Right.
And from there, let's go back a little bit. Before I decided to get my own stuff or try to get my own stuff, I spoke to my dad about wanting to learn how to tattoo and getting into it. And at the time, I believe it was my mom's birthday. It was somewhere in April or something like that, or around her birthday or on her birthday. And I spoke to him about it, and within like 20 minutes, he's like, "Well," he got dressed and everything. He's like, "Well, let's go get it." And I was like, "Where are we gonna go?" He's like, "I don't know. You know where to go." I'm like, "What was it?" I was like, "I heard of this place where people go get needles and stuff like that," and it was in East LA. And he took me to go get the stuff there on the spot. He was like asking the guy like, "What's the best machine he has like for me to get started with?" He's like, "It doesn't have to be cheap. It doesn't have to be expensive, but he wants it to work good, you know." And he got me like the machine, power supply, some needles, ink. And he just told me on the way back home, he's like, I got you this stuff, but I want you to promise me that you never stop or like, give up on this stuff, you know.
Right.
And that was it. From there on, I think I didn't take a day off of tattooing for about 5 years.
Right. Why so how old are you when that specific time when it took you?
That specific time, I think 17.
Right. Where were you gonna start tattooing from there?
So from there, I started tattooing at my house in my bedroom because obviously they knew.
Yeah.
So they allowed it, and I started tattooing all kinds of people. To be honest, like all kinds of people. And if I could think about it, I probably tattooed for about 1 year to 2 years out of my house underage.
Yeah.
And I built up a all right portfolio. What at the time I thought was good, and I still have the portfolio. I keep every portfolio that I make, and I write and everything, and that's the one that got me into my very first shop.
Right. And as you're tattooing these 2 years, like, how were you learning?
Trial and error. At the time, I wasn't really using the internet too much, so it was mainly like Googling tattoos and looking at what was on Google, and just kind of mimicking that look or that style.
Right.
And I didn't know about stencil paper when I first started tattooing. I didn't know there was a thing that you print out and trace, so I would draw everything with markers and pins or whatever. One of the first things I saw when I got into tattooing was a show called Tattoo Wars. And it's a crazy coincidence because when I was doing the murals, I met some guy named Saber, which was like a big deal in graffiti. And he was in the same crew as the guy Ryan, who pretty much was the main guy leading that stuff at my school when I first got into the murals. And this guy Saber had some sleeves on him that were super crazy colors, and like they looked like alien mechanical stuff. I don't know what it was, but it just looked like graffiti lettering that he does, but in a tattoo version. And I fell in love with it, and I was like, man, this is some sick shit. Like, I wonder if my uncles could do this kind of stuff, you know? And I never asked, but I never bothered, but I saw that they were only doing like gangster stuff, and here and there, like they'll try to do something realistic-ish, you know, but it was not. And point is, I pretty much, at the time, LimeWire was a thing, and I downloaded anything that said tattoo. So I downloaded a shit ton of tattoo-related videos, and the best one that I could remember was the Tattoo Wars. And it happened to be my first experience of biomechanical and bioorganic, which would be like organic objects versus metallic and alien objects, you know. And the two leaders of that style at the time, and I still think they will always be, was Aaron Kane and Guy Atchison. And those two guys were just messing shit up, like fucking shit up. And I was like, holy shit, these guys are good. Because they were drawing this stuff on freehand, you know? And I saw the show, and I trip out because the guy getting the tattoo is the guy Saber. And I've seen these tattoos in person, so I'm just like, holy shit, this is like crazy how small the world got. And at that moment, I felt like I can do it. Like I can come in here and just start fucking shit up myself. you know. So I started with that cartoony, new school biomechanical feel, I guess you can say. Very sharp edges, very sometimes roundish, you know. And that was kind of my introduction to real, like artistic tattooing, not just lettering, not just little infinity signs and you know all those little fucking dream catchers, none of that stuff, you know. It was like crazy ass, like freehand, your own taste, your own personality, your own character in a tattoo, you know.
And all that you saw, that was all still while you were at home, still developing.
Yeah.
You know, what you wanted to do.
Yeah, what I wanted to do, or what was even possible.
Right.
And then also, there was another video in that Tattoo Wars, and it was actually, I believe, some guy named Tom Renshaw, and it might have been Bob Tyrell. I'm not sure who, but they were battling each other as well. I'm not sure if it was the same episode or if it was really Tom Renshaw and Bob Tyrell. I'm not trying to remember exactly. But they went head to head, and that was my first introduction to realistic animal portraits.
Right.
I remember that guy Tom Renshaw being like super epic and like going out and taking pictures of bears himself and tattooing them. And that's when I even got exposed to taking pictures of things myself and tattooing them.
Right.
So that's when I started trying to make my own references, because at the time I didn't even know you can just Google this stuff and copy and paste. I was still trying to figure out, you know what I mean?
Yeah, you thought you had to create your own references and or not draw it on the skin yourself.
Yeah, well, I was still drawing it on the skin, you know?
Right.
Until, to be honest, like my uncle told me like, or I seen him do a stencil while I was already tattooing and he didn't know. And I was like, okay, so you stencil paper. I went back to that tattoo shop place, and to be specific, it's called Yoruba. It's in East LA. It's still there, you know.
Yeah.
And I went back there and I asked like for what do I need to make stencils, you know. And they're like, oh, you need this and this little liquid that puts it on a little gel. And they told me, but you can make it yourself. And I was like, really? Like, yeah, you can make it yourself. The guy was like a little rocker guy. And I noticed he was pretty cool with me. And I was like, wow, this guy's cool. And he's like, all you need to do is you got to melt a speed stick and you got to put like 25% alcohol, 25% green soap and mix it with the melted speed stick and just use that to put stencils. And that's how I would make my own stencil stuff for a long time.
You're still in high school, right?
Yeah, I'm still in high school. I believe I'm already like junior, senior.
Yeah.
And I feel a little bit more established tattoo-wise. You know, I already started tattooing like my hand. I started tattooing my arms, my legs, like all myself, you know? And at that time, I started kind of separating myself from my uncles in a sense.
Right.
Like a little bit. You know, I started feeling like, okay, these guys are obviously up to no good, but I did look up to them because of the stuff they did. You know, like the lowrider stuff, the tattoos, and always looking like fresh in their sense, you know, at that time.
Right.
And I was like, man, these guys, you know, they take care of themselves, but they're over here fucking around, you know.
Yeah, right.
And so I believe I was when I turned 18, I got my portfolio together, and at the time I had started doing like koi fishes and like what I thought was Japanese and mixing Japanese with black and gray and like doing like biomechanical stuff and supposedly like skulls and biomechanical waves and all these, or bioorganic waves and stuff like that. And printed it out, put it together, and I went to go to that place, Yoruba. My dad took me, and my dad's like, oh, like, let's see what the guy says. And I asked like, hey, I want to see if I can get a job here. And I talked to the owner. He put me into like his little office that he had a little back there. And he was like, oh, let me see your work. He's like, yeah, you're good to go. He's like, are you 18 already? I was like, yeah, I just turned 18. He's like, all right, cool, you're good to go. He didn't tell me nothing about no certificate to work there, nothing.
Yeah.
He didn't ask for nothing. He's like, just bring your machines, your inks, and needles. You can buy them from here as you work.
Right.
You know? I'm like, all right, cool, whatever. And that was it. That was my first shop.
Yeah. And how long did you last? How long were you there for?
Man, so I wasn't driving at the time. I had just turned 18, and my dad would take me sometimes, rarely. Most of the time, I would just take the bus because I live on Atlantic, so I would just take the bus
One
to
shot
Atlantic.
down.
Yeah, and then just walk from Atlantic to the shop.
Yeah.
And to be honest, it's crazy, man. I remember buying like a little toolbox from Home Depot, and I would roll that thing around, and that toolbox had all my stuff in it. You know, back then I didn't think like I can compress my stuff into a backpack. Like now, it's like wireless stuff, so having to carry like foot pedal and all these things, you know.
Right.
But I worked there for about, I would say, a year, or less.
Yeah.
To be honest, but when I worked there, I found out about a lot of stuff. I met someone that I've been really good friends with for many years, and his name is Hilmar Ramos. Now he works at Black Anchor. So it kind of tells you like where tattooers branched out. Like he has been the one of the persons that have been like the friendliest competition since I've been tattooing with him. Like we've always tried to hang out or keep in touch, and for a moment we even traveled together.
Right.
You know, and we did conventions together, and we would pretty much be friendly competition. He was always, I felt like he was always a step ahead of me, and I'd catch up. He'd step ahead of me, and then I'd catch up. And he'd keep, I was like a weird, like a rat race in a sense with this guy. Like, he was always a step, super good. Since I met him, he was always good. I was always like, damn, this guy's always like, he's smart about his stuff. And he was one of the persons that really, like, gave me a feel for like, oh shit, okay, like there's competition out here next to me, you know, now I gotta step it up, you know, I can't just be like hoping that I'm gonna get good, I gotta make myself get good, you know?
Right.
And from there I met Hilmar, I met some guy named Oscar, who became really good friends as well. He'll be coming out more in the future of this stuff, but so from there they were using better machines, and I was using those Yoruba machines.
Right.
So I met these guys, and they were using better machines. And I was like, what kind of machines are those? Like, they look sturdy. They look like good traditional machines. Like, what the hell is this? And they're like, oh, we got them at Tatzel. And I was like, what's Tatzel? And boom. That was my introduction to professional equipment.
Right.
And that was it. That's took off my work got cleaner, sharper.
Right.
You know, my stamina got faster, you can say.
Sounds like early on you already had a sense of what you wanted to do, right?
Or what I thought I wanted to do.
Right. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't like you're just going in blindly. Just like you already had set goals for yourself of what you, like you said, what you thought you wanted to do. You know what I mean? Like there was a goal to it, not just kind of like, let me just figure this out. So you're there for a year, and then what comes next from there?
So I'm there for about a year, to be honest. Hilmar left. Hilmar, I think he's like, dude, it's kind of far from my house. I live in Hollywood. I'm gonna move over here to Hollywood. And I'm like, all right, for sure, man. I'm thinking, I'm gonna leave this place. Oscar's like, I'm leaving too. Fuck this shit. Work was slow. Right. It was really slow, and it would be hot as fucking there, no AC, and you have to pay percentage. So I was like, you know what? I'm better off working at home again. I went back home, but my dad was actually like, well, you can't just be tattooing out of your room. He was kind of like, I'm gonna build you a studio in the back, and he literally built me a studio. Like I helped him as much as I could. I didn't know much about it. I helped him as much as I could. But him, like with his bare hands, I got to see him like building a structure, lifting these walls up, like doing everything. And I just tripped out. Like he even like pinstriped the walls for me to give it like a vibe, supposedly, and like a little tattoo shop feel. And that's where I started tattooing from home again. And like my dad's obviously super supportive to the point where if anything came up, he'd be there to like, okay, this is what we're gonna do. Right. And that kind of helped me get myself in order. You know, like my mind a little more organized about how to do things. You know? Yeah.
And then at this point, you already had built up a clientele, I'm assuming, right?
I built up a clientele, but they were obviously walk-ins. I never really see any of them again. They were not pieces like now that you start it and it takes like 4 or 5 sessions. They were pieces that were done in one shot, like a name, some, you know,
bangers.
Little cherry blossoms or whatever it was, you know? Right. So I was still doing tattoos like that. So at the time, I was just coming back home and now going back to trying to get clients. And that's when MySpace and Facebook and all that stuff was happening. So that's how that happened. Right. Posting, but no one was really hitting me up. You know, the work was all right. You know, no one really cared. But then I started doing that, and then I started tattooing people around. And that's when it started to crack.
Right. And how long were you tattooing once you went back home? How long were you there for again?
About a year or more. Yeah. Honestly, about a year or so, and that's when I decided to try to work at another shop because I wanted some more competition, like to feel competitive. Because being alone was like, you know. Yeah. So, well, actually, hold on. Let me go back to this. I went back home from that Yoruba place. I was still doing graffiti the whole time. I was still doing graffiti, and at the time, I started doing it a little bit more murals, but streetwise, like in South Central, stuff like that. Right. And I ended up getting with the group of guys before tattooing, and still became close friends with them. Specifically, one guy. I met a really good friend there who became my best friend for a long time. And this guy, honestly, he was one of the more educated people I've met. He was going to college. He went to SMC. From SMC, he ended up going to Berkeley, and that was a big deal at the time for like his family. And I was like, damn, that's great. This guy's doing something good with himself. But he was going to school for art, and he was the one that exposed me to fine arts. He was the one that exposed me to oil painting, to like pretty much what you would consider like realistic black and gray, like on paper or painting and stuff like that. And he helped me a lot to structure my art form, in a sense, to really like, I guess, knowledgeably, or approach art with more knowledge than I would like mindlessly, and just, you know, when you just kind of draw, you're just drawing whatever. And he kind of gave me more advice, in a sense, to how to approach every project a certain way, or pretty much technique, and you know, all that stuff you can really use as a tattooer if you're trying to be more of a like custom piece person, you know what I mean, or custom work where it's more detail oriented and stuff like that, or creating your own work, you know. But so this guy, you know, became really close, and I would paint with him a lot. We would spend hours painting, drawing, stuff like that, hanging out. He'd go there while I'm tattooing, and he would always give me pointers in an art form, like from an art perspective, like, oh, you should do this in this background, you should do this. And I would tattoo his cousin a lot, and his cousin would get a lot of like punk rocker pieces, but he would like give me advice, like, oh, do this, better, that, and then it would make sense, you know. It would be like, oh shit, like I don't have to look at it as a tattoo,
right?
Look at it like a painting, look at it like if you're drawing a logo for a company or something, and that kind of started giving me more structure and how to develop a piece better, you know. And I went from there with that, you know.
And this was within that time that you had gone back home.
Yeah, I had gone back home after Yoruba. I was still doing graffiti. That's kind of the group I was hanging out with a lot. And I decided to stop doing graffiti and get super good at tattooing. Like more than I thought I could be capable of, you know. Like I was just like, I want to be good at this. I have to stop all the little trinkets that I do around me. You know, no more like at the time video games, or no more. You know, I think I would play like sports for the city. Like I would play like basketball, baseball, like football, stuff like that. And that kind of stopped. What else would I do? I think like hanging out with my cousins and going to my grandparents, like hanging out with my uncles. That's kind of how that separation happened. All that like going to graffiti shows, and because there was a lot of that like graffiti art show stuff. I stopped doing everything I could think of that was taking me away from tattooing.
Right.
And I started focusing on painting and drawing and learning the different shapes of needles and sizes and what they do, and learning how to tune a machine and how to tweak it to make it a certain look. And next thing you know, I started finding out about tattoo artists, and then I found out about Chewy Quintanar, and then I found about Mr. Cartoon. And those are two names that were probably like up there for me at the time because of MySpace or Instagram, I believe. No, one of those two, Facebook. I don't know what it was, to be honest. But those are like black and gray people I could remember back then that were considered mainstream, you know. And that's where I started to do tried to do black and gray,
right,
religious stuff and portraits.
Being at home, you were there for a year, and then what came next?
I was looking for more like of a friendly competition, or like be around, surrounded by other artists to kind of push myself again, right, to go up another level. And I decided to go to the local shop that people would talk about that I would tattoo, and they would come to me to get tattoos as well, because they'd be like, I don't know this place, or I don't know, like I feel more comfortable with you, whatever it was. They'd come over here and talk to me about this place. So I went down to this place. I asked for a job. And they said, sure, you want to work here? You come in. You got to be here by 11. You got to, do some chores, get ready to open up, and So I did that for a bit, and from there I met some good friends that became cool acquaintances. Tattooing, and one of them was some guy named Junior, and one was some guy named Chamaco. And these guys showed me a lot about other tattooers. These guys were like, oh, you ever heard of Shige? This guy Chamaco was like, you ever heard of Shige? You like Japanese stuff? I'll show you some real Japanese stuff. He was like very prideful about knowing his stuff,
Right.
And then I was like, nah, I never heard of Shige. He's like, oh, you never heard of Horiyoshi? I was like, nah, never. Have you ever heard of Horichui? And I was like, no, I never heard of these guys. And next thing you know, like they're like, this guy like Chewy's loco, like you like Chewy's work, like he used to work I think with Chewy as well. And I'm like, oh shit, what the fuck, you know? Like they started exposing me to these people. And then this guy Junior would be like super into like biomechanical stuff too. He would tell me about biomechanical artists. And I believe he was into some guy named Pint, since he like drawing skulls and stuff like that. And I was like, nah, I never heard of some guy named Pint. He's like, this guy's sick. He's like, you want to see his work? And he showed me this piece he had in his inner bicep. And I was mind blown by the new, it was like a very new rendering of a skull, very funky but fresh and aggressive, but it was just sick, you know? It was like a melting eyeball with like a crazy teeth and like exaggerated forehead with an exaggerated nose, and I was like, yo, this is sick, you know? This is what I like that is what I'm interested in, you know? They're pretty much exposing me to more tattooers that I had no idea existed.
Right.
You know, and from there on, they start telling me like little things like, oh, you ever heard of this applies? You ever heard of that? Like these metal tubes from Blitz or whatever it is. You know, they start exposing me to knowledge and cool. We became really cool friends with them, and we decided to form our own little group, open a little studio together. We did that for a bit, and then they introduced me to a few more people, and from there, I met some guy named Fowl and Tyson from that little group, and from there on, I ended up going to talk to that guy Tyson because he would approach me through like internet, and that ended up being my second shop.
Yeah. Well, do you remember
third shop?
Do you remember how that went down?
Which one?
I was chilling because at that time I had met Reckham and music.
Oh,
so I would go kick it, and then once I don't know what you were doing. I was there, and I don't know if I told you to pull up or what, and you pulled up. And you posted a tag, but you were just there. You tagged the location. And
that's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah, fool. I was there kicking it, and I don't know how you came up or what, but you ended up pulling up to kick it as well, and you met them. But Tyson wasn't there, and Fowl wasn't there.
I forgot about that. See those little gaps? Those are the foggy gaps that you forget. Fool. You know?
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, okay, because I've heard about Fowl, and I believe I met some guy named Mikey because of these guys, Junior and Chima. You know?
Yeah.
And they were talking to me about Fowl Until Death and all this stuff. And then obviously now I remember you were there, and I was interested to go there and actually see these guys in person. You know? And that's when I pulled up, and I remember meeting those guys.
And I remember you posted a Jaguar. It was a Jaguar, and
was it like a realistic one or?
Yeah. No, but I think it was
traditional.
No. It was a realistic one. And yeah, bro. From there, I think that's where you and him started messaging each other. And
Tyson, right?
Yeah, you and Tyson.
Tyson, yeah. And then he was like, "Hey, would you like to work here?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure."
Yeah.
And then from there, that's where obviously you meet whole another group of people.
Right.
And that's just more tattooing, you know, even more hardcore tattooing.
Yeah.
Because from there, I meet Fowl.
Right.
And Fowl to me was like a father figure at the time, as a tattoo father figure, because I'm a very tattoo knowledge dad in a sense, you know, like he really did like take me under his wing. He like started showing me books, and he was the guy who showed me Philip Blue. He showed me Philip Blue. He showed me books, dragons, drawings, and I was like, wow, this is really cool. And I was super amazed by this guy because he's like, oh yeah, you like this dragon? Check this out. And this was just started whipping out a dragon out of his head, big old huge back piece sheet of paper. And he drew this thing on perfectly freehanded. And I was like, this guy's sick. You know, and he's like, oh, you like those pine skulls? I used to work with pine. Check this out. He had a bunch of books and books and books of like chola girls and skulls. And he was into horror stuff, so he'd have like crazy real. At the time, his drawings were realistic. And the most realistic I've seen in person, you know? And they were like charcoal or what is it called? Graphite. And he really did show me a lot. Like he mentally stabled my mind in tattoo knowledge. You know, he really put a grasp in what was around me and what city I came from and how tattooing was a big part of this place I came from, you know?
Yeah.
So obviously if I was going to do it right.
Yeah.
And he kind of engraved that in my mind. Like, you're going to do that tattoo? I've seen someone do it better, so you better do it right. And then I'd be done with it, and he'd be like, that's the best one I've ever seen. And he was kind of like, that's what I meant by father figure. Like he was kind of someone that was really supportive around me. Because when you're coming up, a lot of tattooers will be like, oh, cool, but they don't really give you like honest advice or honest criticism. They'll kind of just, even sometimes you know it's your worst tattoo and they say sit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or you know you didn't do a good job and you can see it a really like honest mistake and they'll be like, dude, that's super amazing. And you're like, are you full of shit? You know what I mean? But that kind of lets you know who's really your homie and who's not. You know? And that's why I really considered Foul a close friend, you know?
Right, because he was brutally honest, right?
Yeah, and he would tell me, like, dude, that's stupid. Like, why would you do that? Don't ever have that much black in the back. You know, like all these dumbass fools who don't know how to tattoo. I'd be like, holy shit. He's like, yeah, you can copy and paste. But if you can't get creative with your background, that simply means you don't know how to do anything. That's on your own. You just know how to copy and paste. You know, you need to be on training wheels technically. You want to be able to take the machine and tattoo without having to feel lost if you someday don't have a printer or some. You can just, you know, work with what you got and not just need a reference all the time. You know?
Right.
And
how long were you there for?
Damn, it felt like I was there for 5 years with how much I learned from this guy.
Yeah.
And I met obviously another tattooer there too. I'll bring that up right now. But I was there for about a year and a half, I would say.
That was it?
Yeah, it felt like longer, maybe 2 years. I don't know. But
because throughout that time you were also going to.
That was the later end of that.
Oh, okay.
Where I started going towards like Calabasas, Hidden Hills.
Yeah,
Hidden LA.
There you go. Hidden LA. Yeah.
Actually, when I started doing good black and gray, until then.
Right.
Because I was exposed to knowledge and form and structure in that style.
Right.
And I started doing like that wispy smoke stuff because Tyson would do it. You know what I mean? And he would like look up to Carlos Torres a lot. And that's actually where I got to know a lot more surrounding artists, being like Casper, Carlos Torres. Tyson was like super like in love with Sergio Sanchez's work as well, like Alan Padilla, all these guys, and that's where that came from. Like that, oh shit, these guys are hyper realistic. Yeah. Like there's no more realist. This is like already museum tattoos, you know.
I think that's when I seen your transition from
traditional.
Because we went from there to like the dynamic had changed, and I was like, holy shit, you know, like you were still doing a lot of boulder, not a lot, but you were still doing boulder lines at the previous shop. But when you came here, that's when I seen the transition, and it was kind of fast too, you know, like you picked it up pretty quick.
Yeah, I think that was the time where because I got exposed to those like museum quality tattoos, and I was like, I want to take a shot at that too, you know.
Right.
At the time, there was a tattooer that would come in the shop and kick it a lot. And he would work there before, and I guess he stopped working there around the time when I started working there, but he'd still go there almost every weekend, you could say.
Yeah.
And we'd draw and, paint, and he turned out to be Juan Ter. And he was the first tattooer I ever met that I considered a very solid person. Like he was very solid, very honest, very cool, very nice, and very also like aggressive personality towards tattooing. Like he took his stuff very seriously, and I was like, man, this guy's like, he's good, he's really good. And from there, I got tattooed from him to kind of experience his way of, and like his point of view of tattooing in a sense, how he works and stuff like that. I ended up becoming really cool with him, and. Time goes on, I start going to that Hidden LA place, I start tattooing there because they reached out to me like, hey, we really like your black and gray, like you should come out here and do some black and gray. They do more new school, like traditional stuff, color stuff. Then I pull up right there, I tattooed there for about 5 months or so.
Right.
I would make that hour drive over there, almost hour 45 sometimes. And started working at both shops. You could see that one would be like a guest artist or part-time.
They had the clients for you, right?
Yeah, they were giving me the clients, and the clients were getting nice pieces,
Right.
And there I met some good friends, I met some guy named Rich. He was really probably the guy that I felt like the most closest with. There was some guy named Brett who was also really cool. I believe they were all the owners. There was like 3 owners there. Chris, they were all super cool, and I was like, yeah, these guys are nice. And they were into like the color painting stuff and really nice museum color stuff, but like some guy named Chetsar, and they exposed me to that stuff.
Right.
Like the dark arts, you could say. They were into that, like cool dark arts, colory stuff. And there's also a guy named Cody there that I met that was really cool. And I would say between them, like Rich, Brett, Cody, and Chris, those are the guys that I remember mostly working with there, And I also met some guy named Gunner who was really good at New School. He was like one of the guys leading it at the time, you know, like in that area. That was very higher, and that showed me a lot of more professionalism in like being in the more like kind of hood, low key, slightly like grimy vibe, more like rock and roll versus a very clean, professionally clean, established shop. Like they were doing high end clientele. You had like one day you would have this guy. McLovin pop in. What's his name? That guy from Superbad.
Yeah.
Like he just walked in one day with beers and he's like, "What's up, Chris?" Like talking to one of the tattooers. I guess they were friends.
Yeah.
And they were both into like music and stuff like that, you know. So he walked in to get tattooed. So it was that kind of environment, you know. And that was my first experience to a celebrity getting tattooed at the shop.
A sleeve that I've never forgotten because I love the way you put it together and the way it turned out is it was a black and gray sleeve.
Nightmare Before Christmas.
The Nightmare Before Christmas, bro. That sleeve to me, the way you pieced it was crazy.
See, so that sleeve was honestly one of my favorite learning process sleeves. Like I felt really good about myself at that time.
Right.
I felt like I was really getting the hang of it, and I was starting to get compliments from people like Orcs. You know, everybody knows Orcs. He does really good black and gray. Right. I started getting compliments from people like that, following me, liking my stuff, and I was like, okay, this guy, I used to like his work a lot. I still do. At the time, like these guys like Chente, these guys, I had just found out about them not too long ago because of Tyson and them.
Right.
And they're like, oh yeah, these shops are surrounding us like uptown and all these. So I started to like these people's work and they started to like mine's back. And at the time I started feeling good about my work and feeling like, okay, I'm doing something with it. And I remember doing that sleeve with a specific machine. And it's crazy because it all goes back to the beginning. So I started working at that shop and then there's this guy named Rich there, one of the owners, and he had like the meanest collection of Aaron Kane machines. You know, and Aaron Kane happens to be the guy from that video, from that very first sleeve I seen.
Right,
you know?
yeah.
And I was just like fascinated, like, dude, this guy really takes this Aaron Kane stuff serious, you know? And a few people that I had learned from Foul being some guy named Grime and Henry Lewis and all these like sick San Francisco tattooers, like they were also graffiti artists from the same crew Foul was from. You know, so Foul had a sleeve from this guy named Grime. It was one of the sickest sleeves I've ever seen of like a snake with flames and like this girl, all this crazy shit, you know, super sick coloring, like old school, like 80s, 90s, like skateboard coloring stuff, you know, and that's what they're into, you know, and I was pretty amazed by that coloring stuff. And coincidentally, this guy, Rich, had Aaron Kane collection. He had a piece by that guy, Henry Lewis, that was super sick, and I guess he was really cool with them, got tattooed by him. And so I got along with Rich the most in that sense of like, okay, he made me feel, I felt close to him because of that bond I had with Foul, learning that stuff. And coincidentally, I see this guy is into that stuff too, you know, so I felt a connection with that guy, and it's a trip, man. I started that sleeve, and I would be like, hey, like he would be like, you want to try my machines? Try them. And I was obviously running coils still. And I tried a couple of his machines, and one of them I really liked a lot. And he's like, damn, do you really like that machine? I was like, yeah, it's so sick, super smooth. And that's the one I did the sleeve with. He's like, you can have it.
Oh, shit.
And I was like, holy shit. And that was like my first gifted machine from someone like that. You know, and I was like, damn, this is crazy. This guy gave me an Aaron Kane machine. So I like ran back to Till Death, and I was like, look what this guy gave me. Like, this guy gave me his Aaron Kane machine. And like, Foul was like, damn, that's sick. I actually know some guy who's selling one right now. And there was like some guy from that he knew. And I was like, oh, for real? He's like, you want it? I was like, yeah, I want it. And Foul went ahead and got it for me. And that was like my second Aaron Kane machine after that.
Right.
And from there, I guess I became a slightly obsessive thing. And I don't know if you remember at the time, I tattooed your stomach.
Yeah, the shark.
And at that time, I was buying a machine every month.
Yeah.
And I would post it, and I was like, oh, new machine of the month or whatever.
Yeah, I remember.
And that's how my little machine collection happened with that timing, you know?
Yeah.
Because I just became obsessed with like machine builders and like all these different people. I started trying out random people's machines and good people's machines, and
Because I remember when you were in Southgate, remember that little studio you had?
Yeah, that's Chamacon Jr.
Yeah. I remember you had two machines, and like you would tattoo, and then you would even switch the needle out to put a different size needle. Like, you only ran two machines, but you would still switch it out. You need a bigger size.
Those were those two Tatzel machines that I had bought from Yoruba time. You know, I would run machines, those two machines, like until they, until I figured out there was other people who made machines too. You know.
Right.
And when I would go to Tatzel, I wouldn't really like check the catalog. Like I would stick to what I knew. But the only thing I would explore would be the needles and tubes, like the disposable tubes. I really like the Tatzel brand stuff, you know.
Yeah. So what happens after Till Death?
So Till Death, I ended up getting a message while I was still working at Till Death, and I was like super happy there. Didn't have no reason to leave, but this guy named Oscar from Yoruba Times sends me a DM. He's like, "Bro, your work is super sick. Actually gonna open a shop with some guy named Wax, Jimmy, and Big O." And I was like, "Oh, cool." Like at the time, I've never heard of these people. You know, you should come down, check it out. I went down there, I checked it out, and he's like, showed me it was like in Montebello, and I think it's still there. I believe it's still there.
Yeah, it's still there.
And they were like, "We're gonna start this shop here. It's gonna be called Art Driven. Like, do you want to be a part of it?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'd be down." And that was my 4th shop.
Right.
Yeah. And actually, dude, I'm actually missing a shop between all this. There is a shop that I actually worked at when I was in the middle of working at home. And remember Hilmar? He went to go work at a shop.
Yeah, that's right.
In Glendale called Glendale Inc.
Yeah.
And I followed him. I was like, "Yo, dude, you gave me a job there. I want to work with you still. You know, I really like working with you." So it's crazy that my dad would actually drop me off there. I think it was like on the weekends that I would only go work there or something.
Right.
And he would drop me off there on his days off, or when he could. He would drop me off like at Hilmar's house, and from Hilmar we'd go over there, and then he'd pick me up or whatever.
Yeah.
And that kind of happened, and that was it. You know, that was that little gap. I probably worked there for like a month or 2.
Was it kind of tough to leave Till Death? Because I mean, you had a good relationship with all the guys there. And
it was tough to leave. Not, to be honest, like I became cool with the guys that worked there, but it was tough to leave because I learned so much from Fowl, and I had a lot of respect for him. So I try to like still, even though when I left to Art Driven, I would go back there to draw and like do my watercolor paintings with Fowl. And he had acquired an apprentice at the time, some guy named Brandon, and he became sick too now. Now he works at Latin Kings with Eddie Deutsch, which comes from that whole grime and era with specifically like Ed Hardy and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So back to Art Driven, I still always try to keep in touch, and I started pursuing more black and gray and slowly drifted away from traditional. Probably rarely did it once a month, probably none at all. And that's where I met Wax and Jimmy, Big O, Oscar, and a little bit after, some guy named Abbas came along, which I became really good friends with as well.
Yeah.
And we pretty much just started fucking shit up.
Yeah. No, I remember that little time frame.
I think we all became very solid, and we just started fucking shit up.
Yeah.
It was like this little group that came out of nowhere, I guess, in the local area.
Yeah.
And we just was like, a lot of young tattooers were like, "What? It's Art Driven. I want to work there."
Yeah.
And that kind of happened. And at the same time, I was still keeping in touch with like Juan Taylor, and I would go to conventions he would come out in, or I would come out in conventions on my own with Hilmar. And there would be like music. I did music with Hilmar. I did like a convention in Indiana with Hilmar. Like we would travel. I would guess about in Michigan at a shop with him that he used to work at and stuff like that. And right there, I remember there was music here in Orange County.
Yeah.
And at that time, I was still working at Art Driven. I got tattooed by some guy that was there, and Fowl was there as well. And coincidentally, Fowl was like, "Oh, hell yeah, like I'm gonna get tattooed with this guy too." And Juan was like, "Hey, you should get tattooed with this guy. He's sick." And I've seen his work before on the internet. He was really cool. I was still into the traditional Japanese work. So I was like, I'm gonna collect from this guy who's like an LA classic. He moved to Texas. And he was just chilling there. He had no one to tattoo. So I was like, I'm gonna get tattooed by him right now.
Yeah.
And so did Fowl, got tattooed by the guy next to him. And there was where I got introduced to what I would consider real tattoo conventions with real good tattoo artists from all over the world. And that was West Texas Tattoo Convention.
Yeah.
And that was, the guy who tattooed me was the guy who throws it, Alex Trufant, And I got tattooed by him, and then after that, like, Juan was like, "Oh, you should ask him if he has space for the convention. That way he lets you know if he does." And coincidentally, he did have space, like about a few months after. And that was, like I said, my first sick convention.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? My first experience of like, whoa, this is crazy. Like, it's a private convention since it's invite only.
Yeah.
It was like, this is what I've heard of, like, London is obviously like a crazier one, like those big, not crazy, but like a classic one that everyone talks about, And then you have like the Bay Area one at the time that everyone was like, "You go to Bay Area, that's where Grime's at, that's where Sets the Fairies tattooing, that's where," like Ed Hardy goes to that one at the time, like the Tony Mejia, like a lot of people that don't come out for any convention would go to those. You know, Chewy would go to those. Just people you want to get tattooed by, you know. And yeah, going back to that whole thing, you know, obviously I got exposed to conventions, and I feel like from there I was interested in more conventions, and that art driven group happened to be into that stuff. But they would do like these. There you go. They would go to those.
Yeah.
They were like super into those.
Yeah.
And they would go to like the Philadelphia ones, and I think I went to the one with them that was in New Jersey.
Yeah, they do. I think they have them monthly, and they do like
different cities.
Philly, Chicago, Milwaukee.
Yeah. There you go. So that's kind of how all that stuff happened. And
so you started doing conventions.
More conventions. Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah. But damn, you want to go back to conventions? My first convention was Golden State.
It was Golden State?
My very first convention ever was Golden State, and was with Till Death. And at the time, Tyson was really cool with Carlos Torres and them. So being my first convention, being one of, I think, the first Golden State that was ever done, Carlos had got us a booth across from them. And across from, well, like down from them, same row across from them. And I was surrounded by, in front of me, trip out was Bob Tyrrell. And I was like, that's the guy from the video that I watched growing up tattooing. So I was tripping out that I was tattooing across from Bob Tyrrell. Next to him was some guy named Steve Butcher. Next to him was some guy named Poach. That's like a color realism tattoo.
Yeah.
I think he worked at Artistic Element or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Then there was like Roman Albrego. Then you had E.B. Alvarez, like Calm One. Then you had, I believe, was like Alan Padilla, Sergio Sanchez, you know, on that row. And then next to me right here was some guy named John Goody. He ended up winning best of the show. Yeah. You know, so that was my experience to my first convention. I was also very pumped with that experience. You know, like people from all over the world too. And going back to like the art driven stuff, I was obviously like already like feeding for more convention stuff, you know. And that's kind of, they were cool because they like to travel a lot, and they would form a group of people. And from there came like guy Abbas, some guy named Rebel Colors, that obviously most people know about him. He's obviously fucking shit up right now too. So we got Abbas, Rebel Colors, and Abbas brought in some guy named Brandon Herrera, and he would also go with us around too. Before you knew it, it was a group of like 12 guys.
Right at that shop.
Yeah. And or in general that would even come from out of that area and go to conventions together, you know. And I did a few conventions with them. In the middle of all that, we did Golden State again, came around. So this is all within a year. Golden State came around again, and then I hit it with Art Driven. And that's when I did that. And from there, I saw Hilmar, actually, not met him. I met up with him, and I saw him, went to his booth, and he was working at a shop out of Echo Park. And he was like, oh, dude, like, well, you know, how you been, whatever. And he introduced me to the owner. And from there on, I felt like, okay, that's another chapter there, you know what I mean? But that kind of happened with Art Driven, and next thing you know, I start working with Hilmar again. Right. I go to Reservoir, and I start working with Hilmar. And that's a whole nother chapter, you know what I mean? That's a whole nother thing.
When you seen Hilmar and you met up with him, like, were you guys still in touch throughout that time?
Yeah, we were still in touch for sure.
Yeah.
We were still, like, until this day now, like, we still always support each other's work, you know?
Right. And then was it that same kind of like, you know, you see him at the convention, he's, you know, telling you he's at the shop. Was it again like that not that you didn't have that friendly competition at Art Driven, but back to that with him, like, you know, you see him, like, you're like, you know, you see he's in a different type of shop. Did you want to level up like that again? Or
yeah, that kind of happens.
Yeah.
I want to level up like that again. And crazy thing is, like, he's working with some guy named Johnny. Johnny Ayala, and I had met him at Tassel. I met him at Tassel those early days. I met him there sitting in the lobby ordering some stuff as well. And I was like, oh, crazy, you're working with Johnny. Like, I met that guy before. So it was like little, and so it was Hilmar, Johnny, and then next thing you know, some guy named Ricardo de la Cruz that I met at Uptown was there, which is now at Raven and the Wolf. So it's crazy how these tattooers, like, we all started these little shops. Yeah. And now you got Hilmar and Black Anchor, now you got Ricardo de la Cruz and Raven and the Wolves, and I happened to come to the shop that I looked up to, one of the artists, you know, being Chewy at the time. It was that Reservoir. I told the guy I'd be there for a couple of years, you know, and I decided to complete a year not decided, I was about to complete a year when I was getting tattooed by Juan Taylor still. Right. And he was working out of here, and Spotlight. And Spotlight is super historic. I went to go get tattooed there, and we were finishing up my neck, which he had started until death.
Right.
We got started until death. I believe we started like on my birthday or something, and then we ended up finishing some random time over there at Spotlight. And then I started my chest with him as well.
Right.
And when he started my chest, he's like, "Oh, you want to come to the other shop?" I was like, "Yeah, for sure." And that's when I was introduced to Deer's Eye.
Right.
And I came here for my first time, man. I felt sick when I walked in, because obviously growing up and you only know two tattooers, and it's Cartoon and Chewy Quintanar. You're just like, your mind gets, everything felt small, and I felt like I was like in a long hallway walking through this hallway here, that we're, and I remember him telling me come in, like he's like, "Oh, you want to smoke?" Whatever. The point is, we smoke a blunt, whatever. I'm like trying to relax, and next I meet the assistant for the first time, and he's like, "Oh, she's gonna go to Starbucks and get you guys some stuff. Whatever, you want something?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, I'll order some Starbucks." I remember ordering like something to eat because I hadn't eaten nothing, and I felt super crazy weak already. I was like fucking crazy nervous, And he tells me like, "Oh, they don't have any of the sandwiches you ordered at Starbucks. You want anything?" I was like, "Yeah, bring me anything." They brought me like weird ass sandwich that tastes nasty, bro. The point is, I literally threw up in my mouth, and I had to run out to spit it out because I was so embarrassed to go to the restroom. Like I didn't throw up, but I was like holding it in my mouth, like ready to spit it out because like, "Oh, this shit tastes nasty." And I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna go get something from the car," like with my food in my mouth, and I just ran out and I spit it out. But I was so embarrassed to even come back here and be like fucking spitting out in the restroom.
Right.
How nervous I was, And that being my first tattoo here, my first time knowing where the shop was, and I was tripping out how close it was to my home,
Yeah.
Being like, damn, I was learning how to tattoo just down the street,
Yeah.
trying to tattoo like this guy,
Yeah.
And, I come here, I get tattooed, I start walking in, he introduced me to people, and then he's like, "Oh, my station's right here," and I look, and he's like, walking me to the station, it happens to be next to Chewy.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also meet the other owner, Eric, and I get tattooed, and from there on I meet them, and they don't know I'm a tattoo artist. They don't, I don't tell them that I am. I don't even speak anything. I'm just quiet as hell getting tattooed,
Yeah.
And then I come back again. He brings me back around another time when he's tattooing a friend of ours, Mikey, and I come here, hang out, and just watch him work, whatever, just talk to him. Kind of come around again. Point is, going back to getting tattooed by him, I go back for another session now to finish my chest piece. He takes me to, not to finish, but to work on it, and he takes me to Spotlight.
Mm-hmm.
Again, he's like, "Oh, come to the Spotlight, come to the shop, come be over here today." Come through, I go to Spotlight, and we go get something to eat, and I'm talking to him while we're walking, and I'm just like, "Hey, is it hard to work there?" He's like, "I'm curious." And he's just like, "Well, yeah, what do you think?" He's like, you gotta be knowledgeable there, they're very smart tattooers, they're very good, like these guys are, been putting in work for years, He's like, he's just like talking to me and like, not telling me that it's impossible, he's telling me it's definitely possible, but you gotta earn it,
Mm-hmm.
And next we're eating, whatever, we head back to the shop after ordering our food, pick it up, we're eating, and he's like, Chewy said to come through later today, you're down to go? And I was just like eating my food, like, what the fuck did you just say? He was like, yeah. Like I hit that foot, I texted that foot to see, like I have a homie that's interested in working there. I was like, what the fuck? And yeah, he brought me here after the tattoo session, I believe. And I met Chewy, like actually as a tattooer this time.
Yeah.
He was tattooing some guy here. He was back here by himself. And I remember just meeting him, and he's like, "All right, I'm gonna give you my number. I'm gonna text you so we can figure out like a date to talk about you working here."
Right.
And I was tripping out because like he hasn't even seen my work yet or whatever.
Right.
And let me rewind it just a little bit. So right before this, me going to get tattooed by Juan at Spotlight and me talking about this, I go to an art show at Raven of the Wolves. I believe it was either the grand opening art show or just an art show in general. And I go there knowing like, okay, Hilmar's gonna be there. I was talking to him like, "Oh, you'll be there, Hilmar?" He's like, "Yeah, I'll be there." And also some other people, were gonna be there that I knew. Mm-hmm. Some guy named Casper that I had met through Fowl and them. Who else was going to be there? Obviously, Alan Padilla, I had already met at Golden State, the very first one. Became pretty cool with him because of Fowl and them, and obviously he knew Chamaco and all these guys. So it was just, my world just became smaller. It went from being this super spread out thing where I was like, all these sick tattooers in LA, how do you even get to their level or any of that stuff, or how do you even meet these people?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, my world just shrunk.
Right.
Like it was crazy. I was experiencing like a full full-on connection to tattooing, you know?
From what it sounds like, it's crazy that throughout all the spots you had been at, meeting the people you met, how it all just, it was like in a circle, it all came around.
Full circle, because you can say like, I went to one shop, they taught me about exposed me to certain artists, and I went to the next shop and met them. Like, you kind of say that.
Yeah.
Like it was like, exposed me to some artists, tell me about certain artists, went to the next shop, and then I met them. I met someone that knew them, and then I met them. Or however how that worked.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then, so that happened. Okay, so I go to that art show because I'm excited to see like Alan Media's paintings, because he's super sick at oil painting, you know. So excited to see a Sergio Sanchez painting real life, Carlos Torres painting real life, like all these sick people that they also had come out in the show, you know. And at the time, I was still working at Reservoir. Okay, I was wearing a Reservoir T-shirt, like super proud, obviously, over here repping my shop, and I met a bunch of people there. You obviously knew Reservoir. Brian Ramirez was in the art show. You know what I mean? So I went there, obviously support, and then met up with Hilmar there, all that stuff, cool stuff. And then what's it called? I'm there. My girl was with me and her brother. You know what I mean? They went along with me, and at the time, I was walking around while her and her brother were looking at stuff, and I was talking to Hilmar, I was talking to Ricardo, I was talking to other people, and I remember going back to get some drinks. My girl's like, "Oh, give me some drinks, whatever, get some drinks." And she's like, "Oh, these two guys that are like talking and they're staring at you," and I'm just like talking and staring at me, like what? And then I don't know if they were talking about me or they're just talking about something else, but they were just staring at me, and I look over and it's Chewy and Eric. And this is before asking about working there, you know what I mean? So I'm already like, okay, crazy, whatever. I didn't pay no attention to it, whatever. But the point is, that whole art show stuff is over, whatever. I go back, and like a couple of days later, I asked Juan about that. Like, is it hard to work there? You know what I mean? And all that stuff happens, and obviously I felt like, wow, this guy's obviously giving me the shot just like that. And then it turns out, like I talked to Eric, and he's like, oh yeah, we had actually seen your work already, but because we knew you were a friend of Juan, but we didn't know like you as a person or whatever. You know? And that's kind of how that happened, you know? So I guess I didn't know this. I could have probably asked sooner maybe. I don't know, but it's just timing, I guess, you know?
Yeah, well,
but that's kind of how that happened, and I started, you know, Chewy decided to get me hired, and he brought Eric in to have a dinner, and this was my first time exposed to a really elegant restaurant. They took me for like a dinner to talk to me about, you know, working here, and like how I work and how they work and stuff like that. And they told me to meet them at this place in Long Beach called The Opera, which now is mine and my fiance's like favorite restaurant. And that was my first experience to a really elegant restaurant. Like they didn't even tell me about dress code or nothing. They just told me, meet us here, whatever. I pull up, it's like valet parking. I'm like, oh shit, you know? And like I go in there wearing regular ass clothes, and I'm like, oh, like obviously I try to dress nice knowing I'm going to dinner with these fools, but I go in there, I'm like, holy shit, like, I wish they would have told me about, like, dress, you know, like, elegant or anything, you know?
You were more,
I was shocked.
Casual dressing,
casual.
Not necessarily,
like, fine dining, you know what I mean? And obviously, I show up, and, you know, they're there already, and I'm just like, oh, man, that's crazy, you know? Super nervous about it, too, you know? That's why I meet Eric for the first time. I had met him already, but, like, I meet him for the first time as a tattooer, because I met Chewy when I came here that night with Juan. And they started speaking to me about working here and like what were my plans and what my goals to accomplish, you know, as a tattooer. And, you know, what my rates and all that stuff and how they run their show. And
They're running the program with you.
And then that's from there on. That was like 4 years ago.
And you've been here since.
I've been here since.
Crazy. And I mean, just like anything else, I mean, like I said, since I know you on a more personal note, like I've seen you from like that, from like not necessarily the beginning, but from like I want to say from your first. I think I met you, not your first shop, not the second, but I think from there on.
You made me run like after the Glendale Ink stuff.
Yeah,
I decided to stay at home.
Yeah, a little bit after that is when I met you, and I seen the transition from shop to shop and like how things were changing, and I was just like, holy shit. And that for me too, bro, was like always, it would inspire me full to like want to be a better tattooer myself, you know, like seeing what you did and how you did it, like, and I'm like, dude, someone from, you know, my neighborhood is freaking killing it, like why can't I push myself to do the same, you know? Like I said, seeing you transition from shop to shop and seeing how the work changed every time you went to a different shop, that was where, you know, it was crazy, bro, seeing that transition for yourself. And how has it been here for you these last 4 years?
Man, it's been crazy. Obviously, I worked next to Chewy for like most of the time here, and next to Eric and them, and I think at first it was like I felt like I was in a dream. It was like working and then looking up and looking around and being like, I've seen so many photos and videos of this place, on Instagram. And I always wondered like, damn, what does it look like in there? And now to be like, shit, I'm working in the grand room, like the main room with the main artist, and just having that opportunity, I always tell like, man, thank you so much for getting me in here. I told him like, I couldn't believe that he actually got me in. Yeah. And he was just laughing. He was like, bro, you're good. He's like, you're good. He's like, you definitely are a good artist. Like a good artist, like stop.
Yeah.
Stop being like all fucking like and pretty much ever since then it's just been like a crazy like growth spree.
Right.
I was obviously doing art classes, the like human anatomy and oil painting classes, and stuff like that at Reservoir, and I learned a lot there for that stuff, and then bringing that here, and then keeping it myself like as a person, keeping myself accountable to practice that, and extend my knowledge and that stuff. And bringing it here at the time, they had not. I don't know if I'm pretty sure they knew about the Photoshop stencils that I had been doing already for years. Like since I think I started doing them in that transition from Till Death to Art Driven was when I started doing those stencils.
Yeah, because I remember you did the shark. It was a hand stencil.
Yeah.
But when
the end of it.
When you did the T-Rex, I remember at Art Driven when you put the stencil on me, everyone was just like, "How the fuck are you gonna tattoo that, bro?"
And I feel like at that time, people really didn't know about it.
No, I had never seen it. I don't think any of them been there. It just because of how it looks, like they were like, "How are like?" I remember everyone like, "You're good. Like you can do this." You're like, "Yeah." Super confident about it.
And honestly, I don't remember how I came across it, but it was like trying to sharpen up a photo. I was trying to sharpen up a photo and like Photoshop it, and I just remember hitting something that said photocopy, and I was like, get the fuck out of here. I started messing with it, and I was like, this is literally all the information as accurate as you can need it, all the texture you can need it. And I feel like that's when my tattoos went from really smooth to really smooth and really texturized.
Right. And
like all of a sudden my tattoos had a different sense of realistic wholeness to them. Very more full, very chunky, very textured, and I pretty much feel like that's what I brought to the table when I came here. Was they were just like, oh fuck, look at this guy's stencils. You know what I mean? And I showed Chewy how to do it, showed Eric how to do it, and from there on, like now I see Chewy do it all the time. I see Eric do it all the time. I'm like sick. Like it's cool that I feel like I actually brought something to the shop.
Right.
Besides myself as a person, and pretty much the first couple of years I spent working next to Chewy and Eric, and they would constantly critique me. Chewy would always be like, hey, like that's cool, or I would ask him like, what should I do with this, and started giving me advice. I started watching him work. I started watching his stencil process. We would both stencil our pieces together in the drawing room. We would all eat together and stuff like that. So I would watch the way he chooses to design things, the way he chooses to manipulate a photo that is on the internet to make his very own picture, and not allow anyone else to ever be able to mimic it. You can use the same reference, but he's gonna do something like redraw the drapery and add like a hand from somewhere else, and obviously fix it and put something else on there that you would think the photo came like that, but no, he fixed it. You know what I mean? Or he'll squish something and stretch it out, and you'll think was made like that, but no, he does these adjustments to things. And next thing you know, he starts hand painting and drawing parts into the sculptures and stuff like that. And you're just like, okay. So then I was like, okay, this guy's not copying and pasting. He's actually redirecting the entire tattoo.
Right.
And he I saw that his way of putting things together was very wholesome. It was like I was shocked because what I learned from Fao, the Japanese traditional stuff, the stuff that I was able to grasp from it, it was brought back up. I was like, this guy is fundamentally put together in his own style. Like he built his style of black and gray off of Japanese tradition is what I came to my mind. And I asked him, he's like, yeah, that's how I invented my style. And I was like, damn, that's how he invented the clouds. That's how he invented the halo stuff. Like it's a pattern, you know what I mean? Like whereas sculptures, there's air in the sculptures, and there's obviously a holiness and like light that comes from these sculptures. You're just amazed by it. So he obviously puts it in the pedestal. He adds the halo that he invented. That now I would say almost everyone does. You know what I mean? He adds the clouds in the back, and he does the roses with all. Like he pretty much invented a format that now I would say 90 to 80% of tattooers in Los Angeles do. You know what I mean? So to me, it's crazy to have worked next to the guy who invented it, and then I took it and adapted it, and he himself help me do it on my tablet. Like he would get my tablet and adjust it and fix it and tell me that's how you do it. He'd send me the actual copies of his halos and be like, this is the structure and this is how you draw your own halos out. And he showed me how to do it. He showed me how to make my own, what apps he uses. And next thing you know, I was like, holy shit. And that's when I saw my work go from clean, good, sharp to very disciplined work. Very like, okay, now he knows what's background. Now he knows not only to do a sick piece, but a sick background. And a sick background for the background. With some background. Like it was just layers on layers on layers.
Right.
But everything felt so like harmonic.
Right.
You know, and that's kind of where everything just developed from there.
I would say, a good amount of tattooers, like, they all have like regular jobs in the beginning because, tattooing doesn't make you no type of money or, money enough to support yourself. But, yourself, you've never had, would you say, a regular job? It's always been tattooing for you. So
yeah.
When did you know that, because it doesn't sound like, obviously for you, tattooing, it wasn't about the money. It's never really been about the money.
No, that shit just happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, that shit just happened.
When did you realize, like, damn, like, I could, as much as I love it and I'm doing it, when did you know, like, damn, like, I could actually make a really comfortable living tattooing?
Art driven. I mean, till death.
Till death?
To be honest, even before that.
Yeah.
Like, out of my house, but, like, when I really felt like I was getting paid was when it came to Deer's Eye.
Yeah.
Their structure, their format of working, their way of treating clients, like their way of advertisement. Like you come here, I felt like I leveled up a shit ton. Like just myself as a person, I felt more confident as an artist,
Right.
Not only because of who works here, but because of the establishment they built. Like they worked hard to build that energy, that vibe, that force. When you hear Deer's Eye Studio, you think of like right away, you're like, oh shit, Chewy Quintana, Fred Flores, Vito, you're thinking Chris Brand, Evan, you got, who else was out of here? Besides, like, we would say Chewy, Chris Brand, Evan, Eric, Fred Flores, Vito, who else was in here? Man, I can't even think right now, but like, now you got Rooster, which is, he came from a whole different realm of like sick black and gray. Like this guy's airbrushed as fuck, like super clean. And, now you got the new guy, Josh. He's not new anymore, but you got Josh, who's also very airbrushed and clean, very super smooth, And you have Rudy, what I mean? There's like, everyone here is super epic. So just working here itself is just a mean like confidence boost,
Right.
And I feel like this was the place where I really like knew I was not only gonna make a living, but I was gonna be able to take care of my family for the rest of my life.
Right.
Even after I'm done tattooing, because places like this will show me there's more to tattooing than just tattooing. Like we're more of a work smart than hard type of place. What I mean? Like there's other sources to make money off of, and has nothing to do with tattooing.
Right.
Or does, but you're just not working your ass off in a sense. You're using your name and what you've worked hard for to make money.
Right, and that's what you're building towards.
Yeah. Tattooing, honestly, one thing that I probably left out that has been one of the biggest backbones to my career, I would say, would be meeting my partner.
Right.
Like when I met her through tattooing, and I obviously grew the balls to ask her to go out with me, and from there on, she has always critiqued my work just as hard as I would critique it myself, but also point out things that I would try to not make a big deal.
Right.
Like adding too much black to the background, which another person, that was like two people, Foul and her, like, stop adding all that ugly background, And it was like focus more on the image and minimize the background, like you can add later, whatever. But she kind of really helped me structure myself, and also as a person, like sharpen up and polish myself up, So I feel like she was a very important backbone, and outside of tattooing, I think all I ever did was, honestly be with her, paint, draw, play music, guitars, go to museums with her all the time, go out to eat with her all the time. Honestly, I would say I've been with her since, or around her since 2015 or so. So I started tattooing in, obviously, I would have to say 2009, 2010. I don't even know, honestly, but she's probably been there for half of my career already. So she came around at the time where I really started to grow as an artist. So that's pretty much all I really do on the outside of tattooing. It's it's stuff that is not related to tattooing, but it is.
Yeah.
You know, it's still like musically inclined to tattooing in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, and it's tough. I mean, I would say like being with the tattooer, because it's like, you know, long hours, you're talking to people, and like it's not for everyone. You know, it's hard. I guess you could say on our partners, because you know it does take us away from home quite a bit, because we're here long hours, and you know what I mean. Like, and how was it with her with that? Like that, just being gone kind of sometimes, you know what I mean? Like long hours, weekends, early mornings, late nights.
It's not easy, you know.
Yeah.
It's not easy, especially when you start to live with somebody and you know they're waiting for you for many hours. You know, it's it takes time, but obviously she's been supportive and allowed me to become, the artist that I am.
Yeah.
I was gonna say the monster that I am. I don't want to be that guy. Not just kidding. The beast. The beast.
Yeah, but that's cool, man. It sounds like you've had like a good support system since the beginning. You know what I mean?
Not only my parents, but obviously your partner, like that. You know, that not only is she's into art herself, so she had the eye to be able to critique it. You know, we pretty much fell in love over going to museums and looking at sculptures and artwork and being like, that's a sick reference. Oh, let me repaint that. Let me redraw that. Let me tattoo that. You know, and that's kind of that happened. And she actually happens to be the majority of my paintings.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess that's pretty much a quick, brief, like, I would say, what do you call it? Like a scan through my journey of tattooing.
Right. Yeah.
And I've been pretty sure there's still a lot to it, but I appreciate you taking the time to record me and pretty much get down my life story about tattooing.
Yeah, man.
Hopefully this thing blows up. Not my video, but I'm saying your YouTube channel, so you can do more sick tattooers. I'm excited to see the people you interview, so people can get to know the artists that they're surrounded by, and other tattooers could see who came before them and obviously who came with them at their time, after them, whatever it is. And kind of get inspired by other people's stories and hopefully make better decisions on how to approach tattooing and take it to the next level. Yeah,
no, man, and I've always been super fascinated with people's stories, man. I've always enjoyed hearing, what they have to say, how they came to be, and it's crazy to hear. Like I said, I mean, I've known you, and some of the stuff I didn't really know, like too crazy into detail, But no, that's why I'm doing it, bro. I just want to hear what people have to say, their stories, and like, how things came to be for them, and it fascinates me, and I think it'll be cool for people to just, like I said, get their story out there, because everyone has a story to tell, small or big, like it's still a story, and if I have the opportunity to do it, I want to do it. If anyone wants to reach you, like what's the best place for them if they wanted to book an appointment?
To book an appointment, obviously just emailing the shop or texting the shop. Info's in pretty much my bio. That's the only way to get in. Like if you DM or any of that stuff, I'm most likely not going to do it.
Right.